time to shout about some Shout Factory releases. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. I already released part 1 of this holiday Blu-ray haul, and now it's time for part 2. While part 1 had a mix of standard releases, and the upcoming part 3 will be made up exclusively of Criterion Collection Blu-rays, this second part is going to consist of Shout Factory released Blu-rays. I don't typically have a Shout Factory portion to my annual holiday haul videos, so normally I would have just included them in part 1. But thanks to a discount code I received after the Shocktober sale back in October, I was able to pick up far more Shout movies than I normally would at this time of year. With that in mind, I have a lot of movies to include in this second part of the haul. As we go through these films, you'll see I've got a pretty good mix of movies and years here, including some films that I actually haven't seen yet. There's a lot of horror mixed in here, but also plenty of Studio Ghibli, since I bit the bullet and finally got Shout Factory's giant Ghibli bundle. This haul's almost exclusively made up of standard Blu-rays, but I do have a handful of 4K movies in here too. To make it easy to follow, I'm just going to go through these in alphabetical order. If you're interested in getting any of these movies yourself, I do have affiliate links to almost all of them in the description below. I do get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. Alright, so first up we've got The Ambulance. So this is a 1990 film directed by Larry Cohen, and this is one that I have not seen, and that I almost, just barely did not get during the Shocktober sale back in October. So this movie is kind of like a mystery horror thriller. This guy meets this girl and something happens as she ends up going in this ambulance, and so he goes to try to track down where she went to go see her and make sure she's okay, and this ambulance has disappeared. Nobody knows anything about it, so it's kind of, I'm assuming, I don't know, some sort of serial killer or something pretending to be an EMT. Something like that, and this guy kind of goes on this quest to try to find this woman. At least that is the impression that I've gotten about what this movie is, but it sounded interesting, and I really wanted to, like I said, I really wanted to get during the Shocktober sale, but it was a little too much in terms of the number of movies and the price at the time, but with that discount code, I finally got it this time. Next up, we've got Bad Moon. So this is another example of a movie that I almost got during the Shocktober sale. I actually would have gotten this one, but in the time it took for me to fill up my cart and then go to check out, this had sold out. So I lost out on buying it just because it sold out. But this is a 1996 werewolf movie. Again, one that I have not seen. I assume it's a horror movie, just judging by everything about what you could see on this. I do know a little bit because a friend of mine likes this movie, so he mentioned that there's a dog named Thor in this that's somehow involved. I think Thor gets framed for some werewolf killings, but that's the extent of what I know about this one, but I'm looking forward to checking it out. Seeing a trend here, another movie that I almost got during the Shocktober sale, but ended up taking out of my cart. This wasn't one that sold out, I just didn't end up buying it at the time. But this is an anthology collection. So I'm not usually a huge anthology person. Some of them are okay, but most of the time I don't really like them. But this is directed by John Carpenter and Tobe Hooper. So I'm kind of like, it's two kind of very big horror directors, so I'm curious kind of what they did. Another one that I haven't seen, though, this came out, I believe, in 1993. Yes, 93. This one is the first of these that actually has a slip. Those two didn't come with slip covers, at all, ever. Not that I don't have them, they just don't exist for those movies. But this one is one of the collector's edition movies that Shout puts out, so slipcover. So finally, shifting gears out of horror for a little bit, we've got The Boy and the Heron. the first of many, many Studio Ghibli movies in this haul. Like I said, I got this, Shout Factory had this Studio Ghibli bundle, where they just packaged a bunch of them together. This actually wasn't in that. This is the only one in the haul that wasn't part of that bundle. I bought this one separate. But this is a film that I've already seen. I saw this in 2022 when it premiered at TIFF. So this is Miyazaki's most recent film, potentially going to be his last, who knows at this point. I will admit that this was not my favorite Ghibli film or favorite Miyazaki film. It's okay. I actually haven't rewatched it since TIFF, so I'm curious to see what I think of it kind of in a non-festival setting when I'm just watching it for fun. But it was a little weird. Like, even for Ghibli. Not bad. I mean, obviously it won Best Animated Picture at the Oscars that year. So I'm curious to see kind of how I feel about it on rewatch. Next up, we've got another Studio Ghibli film. We got Castle in the Sky. So this is a 1986 film, another Miyazaki. And I have seen this as well. I've seen almost all the Ghiblis in this haul. Not everyone. There are a few in here that I haven't seen. But this is kind of one of his more typical fantasy adventure style films, which admittedly aren't usually my favorite of the Ghibli style. This one, so that being said, this isn't one of my favorite of the studio's releases, but I do like this one more than Boy and the Heron. But this is kind of these two kids sort of go on this search for this floating island, floating castle, and they're trying to get there before the bad guys do. It's pretty good. I know a lot of people, I'm sure most people watching this have seen this film, so I probably don't need to talk all that much about any of the Ghiblis, but I'm glad to have it in the collection. Like the last one, this one has a slipcover as well, but it's all in plastic, so I can't pull the Blu-ray out of the slip at this point. Next up, we are switching gears back to horror for a little bit with Come True. So this movie came out in 2020, and I have actually seen this one. I watched this one as a screener. IFC sends out screeners to critics, and this was one of the ones that they had that year, and I liked it quite a bit. It's been a while since I saw it, obviously. I remember being a little underwhelmed by the ending, but the rest of it was kind of interesting. We've got this girl, this teenager, I think a freshman in college, who's having nightmares and ends up going for this sleep study, and then sort of nightmare and reality blends, and things from her nightmares become part of reality, or do they? You know, it's kind of one of those sort of psychological sci-fi horror kind of creepy things. But it was enjoyable enough for what it is. I feel like it's probably not one a ton of people love or anything, but I'm glad to have it on Blu-ray. Next up, we've got another Studio Ghibli. This is one I have not seen, and of all of the Ghibli films, this is the only one that I've ever heard anything bad about. So, Earwig and the Witch. Fairly new, 2020. This was directed by Goro Miyazaki, so Hayau's son. There are a few others in here that he has directed. But like I said, I haven't heard good things about this. In my understanding, we've got this girl who's an orphan of some sort and ends up going and living with a witch and learning about being a witch or something. I really don't know much about the plot of this one. But I do know that I don't like the look of the animation from the images and the pictures on the back and stuff, so I'm curious to see what it looks like in film, like actually moving picture. But this is one that's kind of low on my anticipation list when it comes to these unwatched Ghibli films. Next up, we've got another animated movie, Ferngully: The Last Rainforest. So this is the 30th anniversary edition, slipcover, obviously, like most of these have had. 1992 film. I believe this is... Nope, it's not 4K. For some reason I thought it was. Not 4K, but just the Blu-ray DVD pack. This, I have to admit, I've never seen this, and that's something that always surprises people, because I am a very kind of environmentally, ecologically minded person. That was some of the degrees that I had in college. environmental science, ecology, and environmental sciences. Never seen it. Heard a lot about it. I know the basic plot, right? I know that there's this logging company and these kind of sprites or pixies or something team up to try to protect their forest. So I don't know. It was just one that as a kid, for some reason, I never watched it. I feel like if I did, I probably would love this one now, but hopefully I'll love it now. Next we've got Fire in the Sky. This is another one that I almost bought during the Shocktober sale, but took off because it wasn't super discounted at the time. I think it was still like $18 during the Shocktober sale. So during the Black Friday sale, whatever sale was going on when I got this haul, I can't even remember which one it was. Sometime around Black Friday though, it was quite a bit cheaper. So this is one that I haven't seen. 1993 film, but it's kind of this sci-fi drama, and the plot, the basics of this kind of caught my eye. It's supposedly based on a true story, but basically there are these guys that are out, I don't know, logging or clearing brush or doing something. It's these worker kind of guys out in the woods, and they encounter a UFO, and one of them gets abducted. And so they're trying to convince people that this happened. I think something happens to the abducted guy. Maybe he completely disappears or something like that. And so there's like an investigation, and the guys who didn't get abducted are thought of, kind of accused of like murdering this guy or doing something to him. So it sounds like an interesting plot. I don't know how it's going to actually play out, if it's actually a good film or not, but sounded really interesting. So I figured blind buy it is. Speaking of blind buys, I have never seen this one, From Up on Poppy Hill. So this is another Ghibli, another Goro Miyazaki film, 2011, I believe. And this seems to be one that is less fantasy oriented, at least from my kind of quick reading of the little log lines for it. But basically it's this friendship between these two students, kind of in the lead up to the Tokyo Olympics in, the Olympics are 64. I think this is set the year before during the preparation for the Tokyo Olympics. So don't know anything beyond that, but I tend to like these more grounded, kind of character-oriented Ghibli films than the fantasy adventure type ones. So I think I'm probably going to be more likely to enjoy this one. Next, we've got Ghost Story. Another one that I almost got during Shocktober. And this is one that I've not seen, but that I have seen this picture, right, the poster, all the time. I think it's just there's probably a lot of people in this, like big name actors, so if you're like looking through Letterboxd, everybody's in this movie. I think it's one of those type of films, which is why it's just so ingrained in my head as being one that I want to watch, because I see this poster everywhere. So this is from the early 80s, I think 81. And it's kind of these four big name older actors, like old film actors. So Fred Astaire, Melvin Douglas, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and John Houseman. And they kind of come together, and I think they tell each other ghost stories, and then they end up in sort of like a real haunted house situation, at least is the understanding that I have of this. That's supposed to be this supernatural, creepy, atmospheric kind of film. We'll see. But I'll be able to finally watch it and see that poster a little faded out on Letterboxd. Next up, we've got The Glenn Miller Story. Sorry, these are all in plastic and still being loud. So this is part of the Shout Select collection. It's number 56 on that. So this is a movie from 1954 starring Jimmy Stewart. And I have seen this one, so unsurprisingly, it's about Glenn Miller of like the Glenn Miller Band and other ventures that he had. This is basically a traditional biopic, kind of tells his story from his, coming up as, being this big band player and then conductor, kind of leader of a big band, all the way through his time in the military and all the way to the end of his life. So this was one that I caught on TCM last year for the first time, because I've been trying to watch every James Stewart movie. I'm getting close, but this was one that I hadn't seen, saw it pop up on TCM, So I gave it a watch, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I anticipated. So when I saw it was discounted in this latest Shout Factory sale, figured why not. Next, we've got our next Studio Ghibli film, Howl's Moving Castle. So this is another Miyazaki film, 2004. This is another one of the romantic adventure fantasy type, so obviously this is one of the ones that I don't like as much as some of the others, but it's okay. I believe this is the most popular, at least in terms of like number of watches, at least on Letterboxd. So I'm sure most people out there have seen this one and probably enjoy it more than I do, but I still liked it. I saw this in theaters. Most of these, the ones that I've seen, I saw in theaters last year as part of the 2024 Studio Ghibli Fest. So this was one of those films. And again, a little too fantasy-oriented for me, but not a bad film at all. Next, we've got Iron Monkey. So this is a 1993 Donnie Yen film. So it's basically sort of a martial arts Robin Hood story. There's this guy, the Iron Monkey, who is stealing from these corrupt rich officials, and he gives the money to the poor, and he kind of helps them out in his normal non-Iron Monkey self, right? He's part of this community and helpful in ways other than giving out money. And Donnie Yen comes in with his son, and he ends up just getting caught up in this, gets accused of being the Iron Monkey, and gets basically assigned with finding and taking down the Iron Monkey by the officials in exchange for letting him and his son go. And so it becomes this kind of battle. Will he turn in the Iron Monkey? Will he join the Iron Monkey? What's going to go on with that? And this is, I believe, kind of like an offshoot prequel to the Once Upon a Time in China films. And so that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that before I watched the film. It was after I saw it, and I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense with the character and the character names. But this one, I enjoyed it. Iron Monkey 2, not so much. I don't have the Blu-ray for that, but I did watch it after this one. If you're going to watch the Iron Monkeys, just stick with the first one. Next, we've got JFK. So this is the 1991 Oliver Stone film, and this is the kind of crazy collection that Shout Factory just put out. You can see it's got like three cases, 3 discs in here, might even be 4 discs. But this is like the 4K super special collector's edition variant. Now they're releasing one that's just kind of a standard release. At the time, this was the only one that they had, and the only way you can get this movie on Blu-ray, at least in the US. So it's part of the Shout Select collection, number 153. So this one is a film that I'm sure most people have seen, but this is basically kind of this drama investigation film surrounding the JFK assassination. And so it's Kevin Costner, and he's kind of trying to figure out what actually happened and trying to determine if it was just kind of the lone gunman or not. So it's a very long film, but it's one that's extremely captivating. You can't help but really pay attention and be just caught up in the drama and caught up in all of these characters and all of these suspects and all of these people giving information about what happened. So like I said, this is 4K. It's got the director's cut. It's got the theatrical cut. It's got I think documentaries and all sorts of things on this. So lots of information. Can't wait to dig into this because there's going to be plenty of content to watch. Next we've got Kiki's Delivery Service. So another Studio Ghibli film, another Miyazaki film, 1989. This is obviously a little bit more fantasy oriented, but compared to some of the other ones, I do enjoy this one. This was actually the first Studio Ghibli film I ever saw pieces of. I saw little chunks of this when I was a kid, never watched the whole thing as a kid, but this was my first kind of introduction to Studio Ghibli, and I remembered very small bits of it from that first viewing, but I've since rewatched it or watched it in its full entirety. And it's okay. It's kind of about this preteen witch who goes off on her own, living in a new town, trying to train and kind of get her magic skills, in shape. And it's just her and this community and how it kind of all comes together and how she becomes part of this community. So it's, again, not a favorite of mine, even though I know a lot of people absolutely love this one. But I do enjoy it still. Next, we've got The Last Detail. So this is a 1973 Hal Ashby film starring Jack Nicholson, Chris Young, and Randy Quaid. And so this is a 4K. This is Shout Select number 140. Weirdly enough, I believe they only released it as 4K. There is no standard Blu-ray release for this, so that's why I had the 4K. But this movie this is another one that I had seen the poster for a million times, and then when I finally watched it, I was like, this is not at all what this poster would have you believe. Basically, this stars Jack Nicholson, but he is he's in the Navy. He's tasked with taking this guy to naval prison, Randy Quaid's character. And Randy Quaid's character is just, he's this big lumbering guy, but he's just a kid, he's just a teenager, very early 20s. And his crime is very small. It's very petty. He stole some money. But he's going to naval prison, and so he's super innocent and really naive. And so Jack Nicholson and I think I said Chris Young. I meant Otis Young. Otis Young's characters are kind of more worldly, I guess, or more, not worldly, but part of the world, more adult. And so they kind of, on their way, it's sort of this, almost like a road comedy kind of thing, where they're trying to, they take him to restaurants, they get him his first beer. They they do all these things with this kid on his way to prison, essentially. So it's a good one. It's different than I expected. I guess I should have anticipated that since it's an Ashby film. But I'm excited to rewatch that one. Speaking of ones I'm excited to rewatch, we've got Little Fish. So this film came out in 2021, and like Come True earlier in the haul, this is one that I had an IFC screener for, and I really enjoyed this. It's kind of this sci-fi, romantic drama, I guess. Basically, it focuses on this couple who, the world is currently undergoing this memory virus. So if you get infected with this virus, you lose your memory and you forget who you are, you forget the relationships, everything about your life slowly fades away. And so it's this couple who are living in this kind of virus world, who are trying to avoid getting it, and then when they inevitably kind of do get it, they're trying to fight against it and trying to remember each other and remember their relationship. So it's one that at the time kind of struck me, and so I'm curious to rewatch it and see if I still have the same kind of reaction to it. Next, we've got My Neighbor Totoro. So another Miyazaki film, another Ghibli film, obviously, 1988, so the year before Kiki's Delivery Service. This was one that I had really heard great things about for years, decades even. I only recently just watched this when it was in theaters as part of the Studio Ghibli Fest, and it was okay. I think everybody probably watching this is gonna like this movie more than I do. I thought it was fine. I liked it. I didn't dislike it by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a little more simplistic than I thought, a little more kiddie, aimed at kids specifically than the kind of broader appeal that many of the Ghibli films have. So it's basically about these two kids, these two siblings who move to a new town, or kind of out to the country, move to a new house in the country with their father, and they meet this forest spirit, Totoro, and it's kind of just this, magical sort of drama thing that he's kind of there in a tough part of their their life, and it's one of those movies. Is he real? Is he not real? Is this all just their imagination? You know, there's a lot of different ways that I think you could read this film. It's got a cat bus, which is probably my favorite part of the movie. But even though it's not my favorite Ghibli film, I'm glad I have it. Continuing with the My Neighbor cinematic universe within Ghibli, we've got My Neighbors the Yamadas, which I have not seen, and to be perfectly honest, before getting this Ghibli bundle, I had never even heard of. So this is 1999 film by Isao Takahata. There are quite a few of his movies in this one, so not a Miyazaki movie. But like I said, never heard of this, but from my understanding, this is kind of like a slice of life kind of film about this family. And so we follow them through all sorts of different scenarios, different, events in their life, different just normal everyday kind of stuff. It's probably better than it sounds, is my guess, but that, for me at least, that doesn't sound too interesting or too appealing, but like I said, it's probably pretty good. One that I know is definitely pretty good is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. So this is a 1984 film. This one is Miyazaki. This is technically pre-Studio Ghibli. It's kind of been enveloped by Studio Ghibli at this point. It's, it has the banner on the Blu-ray and everything, but this came out before Studio Ghibli was actually officially founded. That being said, this is up there as being one of my favorite Studio Ghibli or pre-Ghibli, whatever we want to say, one of my favorites of these films. So this one is kind of set in the future, this post-apocalyptic world where humans have basically destroyed the planet with pollution and nuclear weapons and all sorts of stuff, and so it's a couple thousand years in the future, and we've got these villages that are trying to survive, and there's these encroaching poisonous plants. There are these giant bugs called ohms that can destroy cities and kill people and everything. And so Nausicaa is a princess in this wind village, and so she has this glider, and she's basically trying to fight for everything, fight for her village, but also fight for the bugs, the insects, and protecting the world, the environment. So this is one of those kind of ecologically minded Ghibli films, which are the ones that appeal to me most. So like I said, this one's up there as being one of my favorite Studio Ghibli films. Next up on our tour of Ghibli, we've got Ocean Waves. So this is one that I had honestly never heard of. I feel like maybe I kind of was very vaguely aware of it, but I didn't know anything about it, didn't realize it was a Ghibli film, that kind of a thing. So this came out in 1993, and it seems like it's going to be one that's one of those more grounded, kind of friendship, relationship-based ones. It's about these two guys, these two friends, whose kind of relationship with each other shifts and changes when this transfer student, this girl, comes into their life. I don't know anything beyond that, but it sounds like it's going to be one that probably appeals to me more than some of those fantasy adventure ones. Another Ghibli, we've got Only Yesterday. So this is one that I haven't seen, but unlike Ocean Waves, I was aware of this film. This is another Takahata one. Came out in 1991, and this is kind of a movie that has multiple timelines or kind of time periods. It's the past and present for this girl as she kind of contemplates her life and kind of what became of her life. Did she live up to what she had hoped to do as a kid, right? What she kind of wanted, and was she true to this kind of childhood self of hers? It sounds interesting. Sounds like it does obviously have this bit of fantasy or kind of sci-fi component, but it seems like one of the more emotionally mature kind of films from them. So I think I'm going to probably enjoy that one. Speaking of mature, we've got Perfect Blue. So not Studio Ghibli, but it is an anime film, obviously. This is one that I have been aware of for a very long time, but I have never seen, and have always been intrigued by it, even though I didn't really know all that much about it. I know that it's kind of this psychological thriller, that there's sort of this murder mystery kind of something threading through it, but I've never seen it, and honestly I didn't really want to look into it too much because I want to be surprised by it. This came out in 1997 and has been on my watch list for quite a while, so when I saw it had dropped down in this sale, I was like, well, I've got a lot of anime here, so I might as well pick this one up too. Switching gears a little bit, Piranha. So this is the 1978 Joe Dante sort of creature feature, or I guess when animals attack, kind of natural horror. It's not creature feature in the werewolf kind of way, but creature feature in the genetically altered piranha kind of way. So this is one that I've never seen in its entirety. I have seen bits and pieces of it, and it's one that I've always wanted to kind of experience as the whole thing. So finally getting a chance, because this was one that was sold out during the Shocktober sale. So got it during this sale. So next we've got Palm Poco. So even though this has the Disney slipcover, this is the Shout Factory release. It's just until I can get the Shout Factory slipcover. This might be the one that doesn't actually have one in English. I might have to get the Japanese slipcover. Either way, Palm Poco is a 1994 film, also directed by Takahata, who did a couple of the other ones we just talked about. I recently saw this one for the first time in around Thanksgiving in theaters. This is one weird movie. It's one of the ecologically minded ones, but it's strange. It's about this society of raccoons. They call them raccoons in the subtitles, but they're really tanukis. But whatever, we'll say raccoons for the sake of understanding. So it's these raccoons that have this ability to shapeshift, and they can become anything from people to parachutes to whatever. It's hard to describe, other than there's a lot more there's a lot more raccoon testicles than you'd expect in an animated film, or really any film. It's a weird one. I can't say I really liked it, but I also can't say I hated it, because the messages and, again, the themes underlying everything are good, and there's some entertaining elements, including some of the testicular absurdity. But it'll be interesting to rewatch knowing exactly what to expect. Next up, we've got Ponyo, or Ponyo, I think either way. But this is another Miyazaki film, 2008. And this is the first one that I was aware of when it was in theaters. I didn't see it when it was in theater. Like, I should clarify. I saw it in theaters last year, but when it was initially released, I didn't see it back in 2008, but I was aware of it. I remember seeing it on, like, the marquee at the theater, and I just didn't go to it. But this is one of the ones, like My Neighbor Totoro, that seems much more aimed at kids. It's a very kiddie kind of film, and so it was a little underwhelming to me. It was still interesting and had some good stuff. It's about this boy who finds this goldfish and rescues this goldfish, only to discover that this goldfish has some sort of magical ability to become a kid, become a little girl, because she wants to be human. And it's this weird kind of adventure related to that. Again, not bad, but one of those more fantasy ones that aren't quite up my alley. Next, we've got Porco Rosso, which is one that I have not seen. And this is one that seems like it's kind of this weird blend of that fantasy weirdness, but also seriousness. So I'm curious to see what I think of it. So we've got another Miyazaki film here, 1992, and it's set in Italy, 1930s Italy. And there's this, like, pilot, this ace kind of ex-military, World War I pilot, who for some reason is a pig. I'm sure the movie will explain why, but he's a pig now. And he fights against, like, sky pirates or something. I don't really know what this is. It's weird, but I'm sure it's entertaining. I'm sure it has, deep thematic meaning and emotional stuff that'll come through when I see it. So I'm really curious to check this one out, but I have not seen it. Next one I have seen, and this is actually my most watched Studio Ghibli film, and that's Princess Mononoke. So this is 1997, also Miyazaki. And this is one that is actually a replacement Blu-ray. I already own the Disney version that came out whenever, the early mid-2000s, maybe, the Blu-ray release. But this one's a replacement. It was part of the bundle, and honestly, it's got a few more special features that one didn't have, so I'm probably going to keep this one and end up, I don't know, selling the other one or doing a giveaway or something. So let me know if you're interested in some sort of giveaway there's another one later on that's like that. But it's probably my favorite Studio Ghibli film. It's kind of hard to say exactly, but now that I've kind of more recently seen a lot of these other ones. But this is another one of the ecologically minded Studio Ghibli films, so obviously I enjoy it. It's about this, there's a prince who gets cursed by this, like, diseased, cursed pig, and then this girl who was raised by giant wolves, and they battle against this, town that is built, making iron. It's a whole, it's very fantasy oriented, I will say that. And there's this, forest spirit. There's a lot of fantasy, which is the reason why I'm kind of a little hesitant to say it's my favorite, but I don't know, the wolf, all the stuff, it's an intense one. So I'm happy to have the Shout Factory release of this now. Switching gears a little bit, we've got Psycho 2. So I absolutely love the original Psycho, right? 1960, Alfred Hitchcock Psycho. One of my favorite movies, probably the movie that I can credit as being the film that got me into movies, like, as a medium, when I was very young, when I was like 6 years old. So I love Psycho. I've never seen the sequels. Somehow. I don't know why. I don't have an explanation for why I've never seen the sequels, but that is going to change shortly here. So this is released a long time after the original. Again, the original was 1960. This came out in 1983. But it stars Anthony Perkins again. Vera Miles is in this again. And so it's kind of Norman Bates gets released and he goes back to the motel. And I'm assuming some horrific things happen again. I don't know how we end up with two more, but we do. So speaking of which, Psycho 3. So this came out only 3 years after the last one. So this is 1986. Obviously stars Anthony Perkins again, but he actually directed this one too. So this is Norman and another woman who comes. So it's this woman who, like, leaves a convent or escapes from a convent or something. So obviously putting Norman Bates with a like nun in training probably isn't the best thing, but I'll see how that goes, because again, I haven't seen any of these. And then of course, Psycho 4, The Beginning. So this one, also Anthony Perkins. This came out a few years after the others, and this is 1990, so 30 years after the first film. This one was directed by Mick Garris, who's done other kind of weird sort of B-movie level horror films, like Sleepwalkers, for instance. But this one is kind of almost like a prequel, right? It's like Norman is kind of reliving and sort of retelling his childhood. So I don't know, obviously, because I haven't seen it, but I suspect this probably informed some of the stuff that would end up being in the Bates Motel show, the TV show, whenever that was, mid-2010s, I think, which I did see all of that. It's been a while, but so curious to see how that goes, but Keeping with the horror theme, this is one that I almost got during the Shocktober sale, but again, ended up taking out my cart because, this is a 4-movie collection, so it was a little expensive. So this is the Rec collection, as in record. And so I have never actually seen these. So there are 3. There's Rec, Rec 2, Rec 3 Genesis, and Rec 4 Apocalypse. So 2007 to like 2014. This is one I've heard an awful lot about. It's sort of this found footage virus kind of film, that's very claustrophobic kind of thing. At least the first one. I don't know anything about 2 through 4, and I imagine the quality probably goes downhill. But I have seen the American remake of the first one, right? Quarantine in 2008, I think. So I have seen that, but I always wanted to see the original film. And now I got them all, so I get to check those out. On a very similar note, The Secret World of Arrietty. So this is a 2010 film. So this was Yonebayashi who directed this one. So this was one I saw in theaters as part of the Studio Ghibli Fest this past year. And when I saw it, I went into it not knowing anything about it. And as soon as it started, I was like, this is exactly like The Borrowers. And then, lo and behold, it's based on The Borrowers. So that's a book that I read when I was a kid and a movie that I used to watch as a kid. So this has a familiar premise, at least. But it's basically this really sick kid ends up going to live in the country. And there's this family of borrowers, these really little tiny people who live in the walls and in the basement and, in the crawl spaces under the house and everything. And they take little things. They take a little bit of sugar. They take whatever. But this kid sees the girl. And they kind of befriend each other. But there's this panic that, if the big people, if the humans see them, then it's no good. And so it's sort of this conflict, kind of friendship sort of adventure. But it's okay. Again, knowing that is The Borrowers, kind of changed my perception of it, I guess, after the fact, but it's one I'm glad to have. Next we've got another Shocktober holdover. This was another one that I had in the cart, but it sold out before I checked out, so I didn't get it. But this is Silver Bullet, the 1985 Stephen King film. I've never seen this one. This is one that I've always intended to. It's obviously a werewolf kind of movie. It's got Corey Haim. It's got Gary Busey. I don't really know much about it other than that, though. So it's one that's been on my watch list for a very long time. So I finally get to check it out. One that I have seen, and have seen quite a bit, is Spirited Away. So when I was talking about Princess Mononoke, I mentioned there was another one that I had that I'm replacing, and that's this one. So I have the original, not original, but the Disney Blu-ray release from whenever. So this one is a replacement for that. I got another Miyazaki movie here, 2001. This one actually won Best Animated Film at the Oscars that year. And so this is a fantasy adventure. So again, I know I'm always a little like, on those, but this one's got enough creepiness to it. Basically this girl and her parents end up in this abandoned kind of ghost town. I think it's an amusement park or like a theme park kind of thing, but it's abandoned and it's actually like a ghost realm. And so her parents turn into literal pigs, and then she's stuck like doing manual labor at this ghost hotel. It's a very strange movie. Got some really weird imagery and creepiness to it, but it's interesting, and it's one that I like. I don't love it as much as I think most people do. Princess Mononoke I prefer. A lot of these other ones I prefer. But this one's good. And again, replacement for a Blu-ray I already have. Next we've got Swallow. So this was a 2019 film, and like a couple others in this haul, this was one that I actually already saw as an IFC screener. So this is kind of an interesting one. So it focuses on this woman So she's pregnant, and she's kind of in this kind of weird relationship, kind of bad relationship with her husband. And so she's kind of going through this obviously very transformative and stressful time period, and she develops pica, which is sort of a disease or a condition that makes people eat things that aren't edible, right? That aren't normally considered to be edible. I guess anything you eat is technically edible, but like non-food items. So like she's got a thumbtack in this poster, but she eats like everything, paper and beads and whatever. And so it's kind of this psychological thriller that's also stressful because you got this pregnant woman eating tacks and stuff. So I'm curious to rewatch it and see kind of if it holds up to what it was in my mind. Next up, we've got The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. So this is another Studio Ghibli film, 2013, another Takahata film, of Pom Poko fame. Little different. So this one is sort of this, sort of a folktale kind of story. I believe it's based on a traditional Japanese story, a traditional Japanese folktale. Basically, this bamboo farmer finds this little princess in the bamboo and then raises her as his daughter with his wife. And it's kind of the story of them trying to make her an actual princess, trying to live up to what they think she's supposed to be. And then it's this kind of fantasy element. The story's okay. It's a very long Ghibli film. I saw this one in theaters, and it I definitely felt the length of it. But the animation is spectacular. It's got this hand-drawn kind of watercolor painted thing to it. I think every frame actually was hand-painted. And so this probably, I think, came close to winning the Oscar for Best Animated that year, but I know it didn't. But another Ghibli. Speaking of Ghibli, we've got Tales from Earthsea. So this is another Goro Miyazaki film, 2006. This was one that I had never heard of. Apparently it's based on a book. I've never read the book either, but this one seems to be kind of a fantasy film, but maybe another one of the ecologically minded ones. That's kind of the sense I get from it. But there's this kingdom that is undergoing like weird events and stuff, so this person sets out to try to search for the cause and hopefully try to correct things. And again, I imagine there's some sort of ecological or environmental theme or message underneath that. But I guess I'll see when I finally watch it. Next, we've got Weathering with You. So not Studio Ghibli, but still an anime. This one came out in 2019 from the same director as Your Name, which I have seen and I own on Blu-ray, mostly because it was nominated for the Oscar for animation that year. But this one was, I believe, the director's next film. I think, or maybe it was his previous film. I can't remember, to be honest, but I haven't seen this one, but I do remember seeing the trailer for it a ton. And so there's, somehow this girl can control the weather, or like she makes the rain stop when she's around. So it's probably this kind of combo fantasy, romance, reality versus metaphor kind of thing. But it, Your Name was really good, so I'm hoping this one's good as well. Speaking of ones that are good, we've got When Marnie Was There, another Studio Ghibli film. This one is another Yonebayashi film. I can't remember exactly which one he did, maybe Ponyo. But this one came out in 2014, and I have seen this, saw it as part of the fest last year, and I really enjoyed this one. It does have a sort of fantasy element to it, more of a sci-fi kind of thing, but not directly sci-fi. It's sort of this obliquely sci-fi fantasy story, but it's really interesting, and I really liked it. It's these two girls who form a friendship. And I don't really want to spoil it for you, but there's interesting structure and interesting connection that these two girls have. And so I can't wait to rewatch this one. This one really surprised me because I had no idea what it was about when I went to see it, and I really liked that one. Next, we've got Whisper of the Heart. So this is a 1995 Studio Ghibli film, and this one is kind of an interesting blend because, you know, you look at this cover, this poster, and you're like, oh man, this is one of those obviously fantasy ones. And it does have some kind of very minute fantasy elements, but the stuff that's like on the poster and used in all the promotional material is all just dream sequences. It's like daydreaming and like a story within the story. The majority of this film is much more grounded. It's about this girl who meets this guy who's in her class, in their high school class, and they kind of become friends, and she wants to be a writer, he wants to be like an instrument craftsman, he wants to build violins, and so it's about them kind of encouraging each other to chase their dreams and actually try to do these creative endeavors that they want to do, even though their families don't necessarily think they can do it, at least from the girl's perspective. So this one I liked much more than I was anticipating, especially based on the posters. And so curious to rewatch that one again. Then we've got The Cat Returns. So I know this is a C, and you're probably like, why wasn't this earlier in the video? This is technically a sort of sequel to Whisper of the Heart. So not super directly, but it's kind of a spin-off more than a sequel, I guess. But this one focuses on the Baron, right, the cat from the other one. And so this one came out in 2002, and I can't say I'm a big fan of this one. It was part of the Studio Ghibli Fest in theaters last year, and I did see it then, but it was kind of, I don't know, it felt like a direct-to-video kind of movie to me, from the style of the animation to the story. You know, it was reminding me a lot of, like, Aladdin DVD or DTVs, you know, not necessarily the exact story, but just the way it was presented. It was one of the more kid-oriented, kid-targeting kind of films. So not a favorite, but if you got Whisper of the Heart, I guess you kind of need The Cat Returns as well. And then we've got, last but not least, The Wind Rises. So this, obviously, Studio Ghibli, and this is one that I haven't seen, but I've heard a lot about. So this one came out in 2013, another Miyazaki film. And this one's kind of interesting, at least from the little things I've read about it, because this seems to be more of a historical drama, right? It's sort of like a biopic almost. It's about this Japanese aviation engineer, like this real guy who designed, I can't remember what type of plane, but he designed this specific plane that was used, I believe, in World War II. And so it's kind of about his life and him getting into aviation and, you know, liking planes, liking, you know, air travel, all that kind of stuff. So it's sort of different from these other ones. Who knows? Maybe there's a whole ton of, you know, fantasy adventure stuff thrown in, but at least the core is a historical drama kind of biopic story. So that's kind of interesting to me. So I'm curious what that one ends up being like. All right, so that was part 2 of my 2024 holiday Blu-ray haul. Part 1, which was the regular release portion of the haul, is already available to watch, and part 3, which will be exclusively Criterion Collection Blu-rays, will be available in a day or two. So please give those ones a watch too to see the other movies I got. So did you get any Shout Factory Blu-rays for the holidays? Seen any of the movies I got? Let me know your thoughts and all of your pickups in the comments below. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this haul video, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more videos like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.